This passage from John raises many questions. The first question I had with it years and years and years ago when I read it for the first time is, who are these people, Lazarus and Mary and Martha? I thought Jesus' friends were Peter, James, and John. Well, Peter, James, and John was Jesus' colleagues and friends. They went together with him. But Lazarus, Mary, and Martha were not colleagues. They were just good friends. And I have lots of good friends who are not colleagues. So that was the first question I had. The second question I had, of course, was how was it Jesus able to raise somebody from the dead who was already 4 days starting to decompose? But those aren't, I think, the important questions of this passage. The important questions of this passage are probably the same kinds of questions that you and I are asking in this strange, scary time of the coronavirus. The questions that the sisters of Lazarus asked: where was Jesus when they needed him? The questions that the people around them, their other friends, asked: couldn't the one who had done all these wonderful things have prevented this man from dying? The question we ask when we lose our jobs, when the economy is falling, when disease is rampant, when people are dying, when we're afraid. The question that we ask is, where is God? Why isn't he doing something about this? And here's the honest answer to that. Nobody knows. That question keeps getting asked again and again in Scripture. Why did this terrible thing happen? Why didn't God prevent this? And Scripture never, ever answers that question. And that can be disturbing. But I notice this in this passage. While God does not answer the question, why wasn't Jesus there? Why didn't Jesus prevent this from happening? Here's what you do see. In the midst of their pain, in the midst of their confusion, in the midst of their loss, in the midst of their questions, Jesus weeps. He may not have prevented this from happening, but it's not because he doesn't care. He weeps. He weeps at human pain. He weeps at injustice. He weeps at loss and confusion. But also, that's not the end of the story. Lazarus didn't just die and rot. And they didn't just ask the questions, where was God in the midst of this? And it wasn't ending when Jesus himself wept because of his care and his compassion. Something happened afterward. And here's what we know from this story, that no matter how bad it gets, this is not the end of the story. Today we're at the end of Lent, but next week we start Holy Week, and the culmination of Holy Week is Easter. As Christians, we don't have the answer to why God allows things to happen or why God didn't prevent this or prevent that. But as Christians, here's what we know. God cares. And in the end, whatever we're facing, it's not the end of the story. The story goes on. We are people of hope in a world full of despair. Never forget that. As Christians, whatever you're facing now, we may not be able to explain it, but hang in there. This is not the end of the story. It's what we're facing now. But Easter is coming.